In a blistering demonstration of raw American air power, the world watched in awe as the legendary A-10 Thunderbolt II, nicknamed the Warthog, roared across Middle Eastern skies and obliterated a Houthi mobile missile launcher in mere seconds, leaving behind nothing but scorched earth and shattered steel. The target was a highly mobile, camouflaged launcher hidden deep within rugged terrain in northern Yemen, believed to be responsible for multiple drone and missile attacks targeting Red Sea shipping lanes, and even attempting long-range strikes toward U.S. Navy vessels operating in international waters. As tensions reached a boiling point and international shipping risked grinding to a halt, the U.S. Central Command deployed rapid response assets to neutralize the threat with pinpoint precision and unrelenting firepower. With radar and satellite confirmation of the target's location, the call went out to the A-10 strike team standing by at an undisclosed forward operating base. Within minutes, the twin General Electric TF-34 G100 turbofan engines of the Warthog screamed to life, sending shockwaves through the desert air as the aircraft taxied toward the runway. Pilots from the elite 75th Fighter Squadron, battle-hardened and laser-focused, knew this was no drill. They carried a mission of justice and deterrence, a warning to every hostile force that dared to threaten American interests or endanger innocent lives. As the A-10s lifted off with their unmistakable growl, the belly of the beast carried its trademark GAU-8 Avenger rotary cannon, an armor-piercing, tank-busting monster that fires 30mm depleted uranium rounds, an astonishing 3,900 rounds per minute. Beneath their wings, the aircraft bore AGM-65 Maverick missiles, laser-guided bombs, and electronic countermeasures designed to survive the deadliest of anti-air environments. The Houthis, emboldened by Iranian support in the region's chaos, had grown more audacious with each passing week. But on this day, their delusions of immunity would be shattered. As the A-10 formation thundered low across the terrain, radar-absorbing paint and terrain-hugging maneuvers helped them avoid early detection. Ground spotters confirmed the exact coordinates of the launcher, a highly mobile Soviet-era transporter erector launcher, vehicle retrofitted with Iranian Fateh 110 short-range ballistic missiles. The launcher crew had no idea what was coming. One moment, they were scanning the horizon in smug anticipation, believing their camouflage and location gave them cover. The next, the sky erupted with the deafening roar of incoming wrath. The lead A-10 banked sharply into position, lining up for the kill run. At 1,000 feet altitude, just seconds from the target, the pilot unleashed the Avenger cannon. The sky seemed to tear as the gun lit up, its firepower like a chainsaw of hell ripping through the air. Within a blink, 30mm rounds smashed into the launcher with pinpoint accuracy, detonating the fuel tanks, igniting warheads, and sending a mushroom cloud of flames, debris, and dust towering into the sky. The secondary explosions were massive, proof the launcher had been fully armed and ready to fire. Any attempt at retaliation or escape was vaporized along with the vehicle. Ground forces monitoring the strike confirmed total destruction. Real-time drone footage captured the hit in high-definition clarity, later released by the Pentagon, sent an unmistakable message. Mess with the U.S., and you'll be found fixed and finished. The remaining A-10 circled overhead, ensuring no secondary threats remained, and laid down suppressive fire on potential nearby targets. One vehicle attempted to flee the blast zone, a pickup truck loaded with Houthi militants. A single AGM-65 missile solved that problem in seconds, leaving another flaming wreck smoldering on the hillside. Back at base, the pilots returned to cheers and fist bumps. Another mission accomplished. Another threat eliminated. The world safer, for now. But behind the mission was a deeper story. The resurgence of the A-10 as a battlefield icon. Built for survivability, the Warthog was designed to absorb punishment and keep flying. Stories abound of A-10s returning to base with half their tail blown off, engines shredded, and fuselages riddled with bullets, yet still operational. Critics had long debated the A-10's future in the age of stealth jets and drones. But time and again, in real-world scenarios where precision, loiter time, and close air support matter most, the Warthog proves irreplaceable. The Yemen mission only reinforced what ground troops have always known. When the A-10 shows up, the tide turns. The Houthi insurgents, trained and armed by Iran's IRGC, have waged a brutal, unconventional campaign across Yemen for years, targeting civilians, humanitarian aid convoys, and international allies. Their tactic of hiding among civilian populations and using guerrilla-style ambushes makes them difficult to strike without collateral damage. But the A-10, with its ability to slow down, circle, and surgically remove threats with precision, is uniquely suited for such battles. The strike wasn't just about neutralizing a missile threat. It was a show of force, a strategic chess move that echoed far beyond Yemen. Regional allies like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Jordan praised the operation as a necessary and decisive step in curbing Houthi aggression. U.S. officials emphasized that America seeks no war, but will take swift action to defend its people and interests. Meanwhile, in Tehran, officials scrambled to downplay the loss, issuing vague denials and blaming Zionist propaganda for the destruction, even as open-source intelligence analysts geolocated the strike site and matched satellite imagery to the smoldering remains of the launcher. Across military forums and defense briefings, the message was loud and clear. The A-10 is still the angel of death for America's enemies. Defense analysts were quick to note the symbolic and tactical implications. In a region fraught with proxy wars, asymmetric threats, and unpredictable actors, the U.S. demonstrated it can strike with surgical precision, rapid deployment, and overwhelming lethality. This wasn't just a mission. It was deterrence, doctrine, and diplomacy delivered through fire and steel. The footage of the strike quickly went viral, shared by military enthusiasts, defense news networks, and even international news outlets. Some compared it to Cold War-era shock campaigns, others to a modern version of shock and awe. Veterans of Operation Desert Storm recognize the signature gun runs of the A-10 and remember how it sounded. The growl of the GAU-8 meant hope for allies and doom for enemies. And for young recruits training today, it's a reminder of the legacy they inherit. As the dust settles over Yemen's scorched hills, the mission's impact continues to ripple through strategy briefings and diplomatic cables. The A-10, often slated for retirement, once again earns its place on the front lines. The aircraft's brutal efficiency, unmatched survivability, and psychological impact on enemy forces are lessons the Pentagon cannot ignore. In the words of one combat pilot, "When the bad guys hear the Warthog, they know it's already too late." And for the Houthi crew that day, it was no warning, no mercy, just a scream of American thunder, the thunder of justice, and the unshakable truth that in the skies above conflict zones, the A-10 still reigned supreme. But the strike on the Houthi launcher was only the beginning. What followed was a chain reaction of events that sent shockwaves through the region and jolted military command centers from Riyadh to Tehran and Washington to Moscow. The moment news of the A-10 annihilation broke, global intelligence networks lit up with chatter. Some from Houthi command channels in total disarray, others from Iranian operatives frantically calculating the fallout of yet another U.S. retaliation hitting one of their proxy operations with surgical precision and zero hesitation. The question wasn't whether the Houthis would respond. It was how and how fast. U.S. satellite surveillance picked up increased movement around suspected missile sites in northern Yemen, and American naval assets in the Red Sea were immediately placed on high alert. The USS Dwight D. Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group, already in the region, adjusted its defensive posture while E-2 Hawkeye aircraft extended radar surveillance deep inland to track any possible retaliatory launches. Meanwhile, the Pentagon released a rare statement praising the effectiveness of the operation while reiterating the United States' commitment to defending commercial freedom of navigation in the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden. But behind closed doors, the strike was assessed as more than just a battlefield success. It was a geopolitical message sent in a language only few nations truly understand: control dominance. The destruction of the launcher wasn't just about eliminating a piece of enemy hardware. It was about restoring credibility. After weeks of escalating Houthi attacks using Iranian-supplied drones and missiles against civilian tankers and U.S. destroyers, Washington had drawn a red line, and now the world saw what happens when that line is crossed. Yet the implications of this surgical strike reached even farther. Iran, the puppet master behind the Houthi insurgency, found itself caught in a paradox. Tehran could not afford to openly retaliate without risking an escalation it wasn't prepared to sustain. Its economy already crippled by sanctions, its population restless, and its proxies stretched in across Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. The last thing Iran needed was a full-blown confrontation with U.S. forces. But to do nothing was equally dangerous for its image as a regional resistance powerhouse. Thus began a campaign of whispers and indirect threats. Iranian state media downplayed the strike, falsely claiming the launcher had been moved hours earlier. Meanwhile, IRGC-linked telegram channels circulated vague warnings about surprises awaiting U.S. forces in the days to come. American intelligence intercepted some of these communications and confirmed the deployment of fresh drone teams to the western Yemeni coast, likely aimed at probing U.S. naval defenses or launching swarm attacks against softer targets. But CENTCOM was ready. The Aegis-equipped destroyers in the area, including the USS Gravely and USS Carney, ran constant battle drills, while Patriot missile batteries in Saudi Arabia and anti-drone systems in Djibouti were put on full alert. The United States was preparing not just for another attack. It was preparing to make any such attack the final mistake of any hostile force. Meanwhile, in Washington, the National Security Council convened an emergency session to assess the strategic landscape post-strike. Advisors presented real-time imagery of the blast zone, showcasing the total devastation left by the A-10's wrath. Satellite photos revealed not just one launcher, but secondary ammunition storage depots nearby that had also been destroyed in the resulting inferno, suggesting the strike had degraded more of the Houthi military infrastructure than initially thought. Presidentially briefed generals praised the precision and restraint of the mission, minimal risk, maximum impact. They emphasized that the use of A-10s, despite ongoing debates about their retirement, was once again vindicated. The aircraft had delivered surgical death while maintaining U.S. credibility and control of escalation. Behind the scenes, lawmakers who had once pushed for the A-10's decommissioning quietly softened their stance. Footage from the mission was shown in a closed-door Capitol Hill briefing, where even the most hardened critics had to acknowledge one thing. When boots are on the ground or allies are in harm's way, the Warthog delivers in ways no drone or stealth fighter can. Across military bases worldwide, service members gathered around screens to watch and re-watch the strike footage, mesmerized not only by the raw firepower, but by what it represented: resolve. In Bahrain, coalition allies offered praise and asked for intelligence support to carry out similar missions against militia groups in Iraq and Syria. In London, Paris, and Canberra, intelligence chiefs took note of the evolving tactics and a continued reliance on legacy platforms to execute modern counterinsurgency missions with ruthless effectiveness. Even Russia and China, always quick to spin anti-U.S. narratives, struggled to find footing as the sheer clarity of the strike's legality and precision undercut any propaganda attempts. Russian state media tried to distract by reporting on unrelated exercises in the Pacific, while Chinese outlets warned vaguely about U.S. military adventurism. But the facts were too powerful to bury. And on the ground in Yemen, locals near the strike zone, long terrorized by the presence of Houthi mobile units, quietly celebrated. Reports from humanitarian organizations indicated that the region had seen multiple missile launches in recent weeks from that very site, often using surrounding villages as human shields. With the launcher gone and no civilian casualties reported, local leaders expressed cautious relief. Some even shared footage with journalists, showing children returning to school the next day, walking past the blackened crater left behind by American firepower. It was a moment of eerie peace, born not from treaties or talks, but from overwhelming deterrence, the kind that only an A-10 Warthog can deliver when unleashed. But what comes next? For U.S. forces, the mission signaled a shift in engagement rules. The Pentagon authorized a broader mission scope for A-10s and other close air support aircraft in the region, allowing faster response to real-time threats. The Air Force confirmed that more Thunderbolt squadrons were being rotated into bases in the Arabian Peninsula and East Africa, with pilots briefed on updated maps of high-value targets across Yemen and southern Saudi Arabia. Drone reconnaissance was tripled, intercept missions increased, and psychological operations began broadcasting warnings to Houthi fighters, urging them to surrender or abandon missile sites before the next strike. In psychological terms, The strike had an even deeper effect. For years, Houthi propaganda had painted the U.S. as weak, distracted, and unwilling to take risks. The myth of American hesitation was a core recruitment tool. But with one well-placed strike, that narrative was reduced to rubble. Social media platforms exploded with footage of the hit, shared even by opposition groups within Yemen who cheered the end of yet another weapon that had terrorized cities. Among Houthi ranks, morale took a significant blow. Intercepted communications suggested confusion, panic, and finger-pointing. As the sun rose over the blistered terrain of Yemen, the smoldering wreckage of the Houthi launcher still sent pillars of black smoke into the air, a tombstone for reckless defiance carved by 30mm titanium-jacketed justice from above. But while the fire on the ground began to fade, the firestorm in diplomatic circles only intensified. Military analysts across the globe dissected the operation with forensic intensity, drawing lines between tactical victory and long-term strategic calculus. NATO allies issued statements in solidarity, with the United Kingdom and France reaffirming their support for continued joint maritime patrols in the Red Sea, even hinting at deploying their own air assets should U.S. forces require reinforcement. Israel, always closely watching Iranian proxies, increased its surveillance flights over the Gulf of Aden and deployed naval assets in coordination with U.S. Central Command. Meanwhile, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia discreetly relayed praise for the decisive strike, while using the moment to call for an expanded multinational coalition to safeguard the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, one of the world's most critical oil choke points. The message behind closed doors was unified and clear. The world was no longer willing to tolerate rogue actors destabilizing international shipping lanes under the umbrella of Iranian patronage. And the A-10, a relic of Cold War design but a legend of modern close air support, had once again proven that raw firepower combined with surgical precision is more than just a battlefield tool. It is a geopolitical scalpel. Yet as global powers jockey for narrative control, the U.S. military remained laser-focused on what came next. The strike had opened a window of opportunity, and within that window, CENTCOM initiated Operation Iron Barrier, a multi-phase mission plan that included aerial suppression of additional Houthi assets, increased drone surveillance over suspected weapons depots, and the rapid construction of forward operating intelligence posts near the Yemeni coastline. A-10s were not alone in the theater now. Joining them were F-15E Strike Eagles, capable of rapid response deep penetration strikes, and MQ-9 Reapers program for ISR and hunter-killer missions. The air was thick with constant surveillance. Predator feeds streamed live into mobile command centers, allowing Joint Task Force commanders to identify, confirm, and strike high-value targets in real time. In Djibouti, crews stood on 24-hour alert, engines hot, ordnance loaded, pilots briefed. The mission profile evolved. It wasn't about reacting anymore. It was about dominance through unrelenting vigilance. And if the Houthis so much as moved a launcher, a drone, or even a radio antenna, they knew now that retaliation would arrive not in hours, but in minutes, delivered by the thunder of a Warthog's GAU-8 Avenger. Inside the belly of those aircraft, pilots didn't view themselves as heroes. They were professionals, guardians of airspace, executioners of policy written in the language of precision warfare. The pilot of the original A-10 strike, still anonymous for operational security, had been hailed quietly among his peers as a warrior who delivered when it counted. In private debriefings, he spoke not of glory but of duty, explaining how he had locked eyes on the target through his advanced sniper XR pod, confirmed the launcher, waited until the blast radius would pose no collateral threat, and then unleashed a twin burst of justice. The first stream of 30mm shells hit the top of the launcher. The second, just a hair to the right, exploded its payload. The resulting chain reaction vaporized the target and set nearby ammunition on fire. Within 7 seconds, the entire battlefield had transformed from active threat to burned-out husk. "Mission complete," he radioed calmly, before turning into a wide left bank and climbing out of range. No cheers, no adrenaline surge. Just another day ensuring peace through overwhelming strength. Back in the political heart of the United States, the ripple effects reached the White House Situation Room, where a post-strike briefing convened within hours of the attack. The president, surrounded by the Joint Chiefs and National Security Advisors, reviewed the drone footage in silence. When it ended, he reportedly turned to a room and said, "Let that be a lesson. They touch our forces or allies, we erase them." That soundbite, though classified, quickly leaked through insider channels and circulated across intelligence communities as a stark reminder that the current administration would not back down from hardline postures when red lines are crossed. Congressional hearings quickly followed, with military officials praising the use of legacy airframes like the A-10 in hybrid warfare environments, where drone strikes weren't suitable and high-altitude bombers were overkill. It became a rallying cry, not just for A-10 preservation, but for maintaining a military capable of adapting to modern asymmetrical threats, while still having the muscle to stomp them out when diplomacy failed. Meanwhile, the Houthis regrouped in the shadows. Their media channels attempted to downplay the event, referring to it as a minor setback. But the truth was harder to spin. Recruitment videos slowed. Morale dipped. Desertion rose. Some tribal leaders who had previously offered logistical support now distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with a group proven vulnerable to the world's most fearsome CS platform. Iranian advisors embedded with Houthi units reportedly initiated emergency protocols, rerouting communications, relocating command posts underground, and ordering a stand-down for launch operations until further notice. They feared not only the thunder of the A-10, but the silence that preceded it, a ghost in the sky whose roar spelled doom within seconds. In Tehran, strategy rooms lit up with frantic reviews of U.S. engagement patterns. If America could find and destroy a hidden launcher in seconds, then what else could they do? How many other, unseen, weapons caches were now targets? What if the next strike wasn't in Yemen, but in Syria, Iraq, or even the Persian Gulf? And as always, China and Russia watched closely, silently calculating the value of every American move. To Beijing, it was another data point in their evaluation of American military response doctrine, one that would undoubtedly influence their own calculus around Taiwan. To Moscow, bogged down in its own grinding war in Ukraine, the demonstration of American resolve, executed with old-school hardware and new-era precision, was both unsettling and humiliating. Russian state media, desperate to pivot attention, launched a disinformation campaign claiming the launcher destroyed wasn't operational, but the intelligence images, infrared footage, and secondary explosions told a different story. The truth, raw and undistorted, had already traveled the world before their lives left the runway. On the ground, U.S. Special Operations teams began insertion into key Allied regions bordering Yemen, establishing forward operating bases with direct satellite links to Air Force Command. These units, comprised of SEALs, Delta Force operators, and elite Marine raiders, weren't there for diplomacy. They were there to call in fire support, paint targets, and ensure that if the Houthis so much as raised a radio antenna in defiance, there would be a missile or a Warthog in the sky above it within moments. As the sun set over the Red Sea, painting the horizon in hues of blood orange and deep navy blue, the U.S. military strategic message was now crystal clear. America was no longer content to play defense in the shadows of foreign proxies. The A-10 Warthog's annihilation of the Houthi missile launcher wasn't just a precision strike. It was a thunderclap across the geopolitical landscape, a roaring declaration that any threat to U.S. assets or international shipping lanes would be met with overwhelming, surgical, and unapologetic force. That single act of airborne dominance had recalibrated the balance of fear in the region. Houthis no longer owned the night. With satellites overhead, Reapers circling, and Warthogs flying just above the treetops, their command posts became traps, their tunnels liabilities, and their rockets ticking time bombs. The American presence wasn't just a deterrent anymore. It was an unstoppable hunting machine. Intelligence reports in the following days confirmed a mass movement of Houthi troops deeper inland, abandoning coastal regions under relentless aerial surveillance. Radio chatter intercepted by U.S. SIGINT analysts revealed desperation in their tone. Commanders shouting in broken cadence, scrambling to reorganize what remained of their launcher units, and panicked requests to Iranian handlers for replacement equipment, new codes, and better concealment protocols. But the damage had been done. Fear spread faster than supply lines, and morale crumbled like their shattered launch pads. Meanwhile, back at Davis Monthan Air Force Base in Arizona, the spiritual home of the A-10 fleet, ground crews, pilots, and commanders watched the strike footage with a familiar sense of pride. For years, the Warthog had been threatened with retirement, deemed too old, too slow, or too expendable in the face of fifth-generation stealth jets and space-age drones. But in one mission, that narrative had been buried under the rubble of a Yemeni hillside. The footage of the launcher being torn to shreds in seconds became an internal case study in effective close air support. Pentagon insiders began to leak memos advocating for a new round of funding for updated A-10 platforms, airframes retrofitted with more advanced sensors, stronger armor composites, and enhanced munitions integration. To retire the Warthog, lobby suddenly found itself fighting uphill against a machine whose thunder had reignited its legend. Even U.S. Marines, often wary of Air Force priorities, acknowledged that the A-10 had proven it was not just still useful, but irreplaceable in certain theaters of operation. Congressional hearings reignited, with defense hawks presenting the strike as Exhibit A in the case for maintaining an A-10 presence in every hot zone on Earth. Veterans groups weighed in. Military forums buzzed with praise. And across social media, the strike was replayed millions of times, overlaid with patriotic music and hashtags like hashtag Warthog Justice and hashtag Never Retire the A-10. The psychological impact on America's enemies was immediate and devastating. Iranian Revolutionary Guard commanders, already burdened by economic sanctions and mounting pressure from within, now had to grapple with the reality that even their most well-hidden assets could be sniffed out and obliterated by a decades-old aircraft with titanium bathtub and a cannon that spat depleted uranium at 70 rounds per second. Tehran's propaganda arm tried to spin the event, calling the launcher expendable and the strike ineffective against our regional influence. But behind closed doors, they knew better. If America could send an A-10 into contested space with impunity, what else were they willing to deploy next? Rumors began circulating of AC-130 Spectre gunships moving closer to the region, and whispers emerged of cyber attacks already underway, softening the digital terrain before the next kinetic blow. Iran doubled its encryption protocols, fearing infiltration. Syrian militias aligned with Hezbollah started pulling back from certain positions. Even in Iraq, rogue Shiite militias temporarily stood down, unwilling to draw the same fury that had just incinerated the Houthis' pride in a flash of tracer fire and turbine thunder. Back on the diplomatic front, America wielded the aftermath like a scalpel. In meetings with Gulf states, senior U.S. officials leveraged the strike to broker enhanced intelligence sharing deals, greater port access, and expanded logistical corridors through partner nations. Countries that had previously doubted Washington's willingness to act decisively now leaned in closer, eager to be on the side of the power that didn't just talk about red lines. It enforced them with a 7-barrel Gatling gun. U.S. allies like Australia and Japan expressed public support, calling the strike an appropriate show of force in defense of international maritime law. Even Germany, often cautious in military matters, issued a rare statement backing America's right to protect global commerce. The United Nations held emergency sessions, not to condemn the U.S. strike, but to assess the growing threat of Houthi destabilization and the necessity of a broader peacekeeping presence. In the eyes of the world, the A-10 had done what diplomacy alone could not. It reminded both allies and enemies that America's patience may be long, but its sword is always sharp. And through it all, the crew that pulled off the mission, pilot, weapons officer, support units, remained humble, focused, and mission-ready. In interviews conducted weeks later under tight security, the pilot only said this: "I did my job. We all did. And we'll do it again tomorrow if they give us a reason." That quiet resolve echoed across every squadron, every hangar, every forward operating base where American service members stood watch under foreign stars. The A-10, loud and ugly and unshakably loyal, became once again the symbol of that ethos. Get the job done, protect your own, and never let fear dictate the mission. And so, as more warthogs soared into the skies over the Middle East, their unmistakable silhouette casting long shadows over a war-weary land, they carry with them the spirit of a nation that doesn't seek war, but will never back down from either. In the weeks that followed, more strikes came. Launchers hidden in hills, convoys rolling through remote wadis, weapons depots disguised as schools and mosques. All identified, confirmed, and destroyed. The U.S. wasn't just responding now. It was rewriting the rules of engagement. And the Houthis, once emboldened by proxy protection, now found themselves isolated and hunted. Panic spread through their command ranks. And as their world shrank beneath the relentless eyes of satellites and the lethal roar of tens, one thing became undeniable. The age of impunity was over. From Yemen to Tehran, from the Pentagon to the far reaches of the Arabian Sea, the echo of that first strike, those 7 seconds of annihilation, rippled through history as a moment everything changed. In a war full of shadows, one aircraft made it crystal clear. When the A-10 Warthog flies, America means business.